Hello and welcome to this short summary of the Remote Learning Rapid Evidence Assessment, which was published by the EEF in April earlier this month. Obviously, this is a topic that lots of us are thinking a huge amount about at the moment as we're all scrambling to put resources in place to support our students during the lockdown. So really helpful to have a look at some of the evidence behind that and to find out what our best bets are for supporting our learners. So this is what the report looks like. You can download it from the EEF website, or you can follow that link. And the report summarises the findings from 50 systematic reviews and meta-analyses under 5 topic areas: general remote teaching and learning, blended learning, computer-supported collaborative learning, computer-assisted instruction, and educational games. And looking into all of the research in all of those different aspects of remote learning, the EEF's been able to synthesise those and distill those into 5 key recommendations. And the first of these is that teaching quality is more important than how lessons are delivered. So the evidence found no clear difference in terms of pupil outcomes in teaching in real time, so delivering live lessons and webinars, synchronous teaching, and the alternatives, asynchronous teaching, recorded lessons, videos, absolutely no difference in outcomes. What did make the difference were clear explanations, scaffolding, modelling, and feedback. These were way more important than how they were provided or when. And what seems to matter most is whether the explanation and the new material builds clearly on pupils' prior learning, and how pupils' understanding is then subsequently assessed. The key finding number 2 is that ensuring access to technology is key, particularly for disadvantaged students, and this will come as no surprise to many of us. Most reviews identify lack of technology as a barrier to successful remote instruction, and it's important that support is provided. And this week, in fact, the Department for Education has announced a programme whereby they will be able to offer disadvantaged pupils support with technology, so that's to be welcomed. In addition to providing that technology, it's really important to ensure that teachers and pupils are able to use it, that they're given support and guidance, and whether that's through CPD or through ensuring that it's as simple and as straightforward to use as possible. But that's key for successful implementation. Number 3 is that peer interactions can provide motivation and improve learning outcomes. Many reviews highlighted the importance of peer interactions during remote learning as a way of motivating pupils and of improving pupil outcomes. A range of different types of peer interaction were explored, including peer marking and feedback, sharing models of good work, and opportunities for live discussion. And we'll see later that the peer feedback and marking seem to have particularly promising outcomes. And the value of collaborative approaches was emphasised in many of the reviews, although a word of caution, and we will talk further about the limitations. Many of these were with older students, were with university students or sixth form students. Different approaches to peer interactions are likely to be better suited to different age groups. Supporting pupils to work independently can really improve outcomes. Pupils will often need to work independently, especially at the moment when parents are desperately trying to work from home at the same time. So pupils having those tools to be able to do that are very powerful. For example, prompting pupils to reflect on their work or to consider the strategies they'll use if they'll get stuck have been highlighted as valuable. Wider evidence related to metacognition and self-regulation suggests that disadvantaged pupils are particularly likely to benefit from explicit support to help them work independently, for example, with checklists or daily plans. Further guidance around metacognition can be found in the EEF's guidance report, and again you can Google that or you can go straight to the EEF website on key recommendations for teaching self-regulation and metacognition. So it might be an idea to be thinking about how that can be woven into the current offer. Key finding number 5, different approaches to remote learning suit different tasks and types of content. Approaches to remote learning vary widely and have different strengths and weaknesses, and teachers should be supported to consider which approaches are best suited to the content they're teaching and the age of their pupils. For example, games for learning were found to have a really high impact on vocabulary learning in foreign languages, but less evidence of their use in other subjects. Likewise, technology to support retrieval practice and self-quizzing can help pupils retain key ideas and knowledge, but can't be a replacement for other forms of assessment. So those are the key findings from the review, and we're now going to look very quickly at the different categories of remote learning that the research studies were divided into. So there's general remote teaching and learning, so combining a range of strategies, and the outcomes of that are generally comparable to face-to-face teaching. So if we are providing clear explanations, scaffolding learning, modelling clearly, and are able to provide feedback, then there's quite a lot of evidence to say that if our pupils are accessing that learning, we shouldn't see much of a learning loss. And there's quite a lot of evidence within that as well to say that peer interactions can improve outcomes. So that's something really to consider. Again, some more caveats. There is limited evidence around remote teaching and learning in primary settings. Most of the evidence comes from higher education. Moving on to look at blended learning. So again, combination of online instruction with classroom activities. So we have to question the relevance of that slightly to where we are at the moment. However, the review was very careful to look at those online instruction elements of the blended learning in separation from the classroom activities, which we're unable to deliver at the moment. Again, lack of access to technology will always be a barrier there. But in those blended learning schemes, in the online instruction aspect of those, peer marking was a really promising component of some of these schemes, especially when that's anonymised both ways. So the person giving the feedback is anonymous and the person to whom they are giving the feedback also anonymous. And again, CPD for teachers using these technologies is important. There is a case study, an EEF-funded evaluation available on the EEF website, looking at the flipped learning research project. There's a link to it there if you'd like to read a little bit more, in which pupils learned online content first and then used class time for activities to reinforce learning. So again, not directly comparable to where we are now, but an interesting steer on effectiveness. And then we have computer-supported collaborative learning. So collaborative learning through social interaction, and that might be through video, through chats, through emails, discussion boards and knowledge forums, or through shared workspaces such as Google Docs or Slack. These have been consistently linked to positive impacts on pupil outcomes. Most of the evidence reviewed again was with older students and was in STEM subjects and for language learning. And again, we see that peer assessment and feedback strategies led to positive outcomes. And of course, there are huge links to those peer assessment strategies and to those metacognitive strategies as well. Interestingly, when we're thinking about combining those technologies, video conferencing was more successful when paired with shared online workspaces, less successful when paired with email. Computer-assisted instruction, this covers a range of approaches, so computer-based interventions that scaffold the practice, intelligent tutoring systems that give adaptive feedback to students, and if students are getting everything right, then the level of challenge goes up. If they're struggling, then similar types of questions to those that they're struggling with will get repeated. However, again, another limitation, most computer-assisted instruction programs have been evaluated in terms of their application within a school context. So we do have to ask that question, are they then transferable to use at home? And again, where successful, the scaffolding and the feedback components are really important in terms of the successful outcomes. Again, support and guidance for students and teachers in using the technology is essential. And we've got a couple of examples again on the EEF website of some funded evaluations. One of 1 billion, which was Key Stage 1 Early Maths programme, and ABRA, which is short for the Abracadabra programme, which is around phonics and comprehension and reading fluency. So interesting in terms of their responsiveness, but again, we need to have those caveats that these have been evaluated for use within a school context. And then the last of these was games for learning. Similar word of warning, really. Many games for learning have been evaluated only within the school context, so we do have to ask questions about transferability. And again, we're seeing the same themes coming back. Where they were successful, modelling, scaffolding, feedback, and personalisation are integral components. The evidence base is stronger for using games to learn foreign languages and specifically for vocabulary learning within that. Again, we have an EEF-funded evaluation which looked at the Grapho game Rhyme, which is about developing phonological awareness and phonics skills, and you can read more about that, but supported children's learning of phonics within the school context. I wanted to share 3 other guidance reports which I think are really useful at the moment when we're trying to support pupils learning from home. The Metacognition and Self-Regulated Learning Guidance Report is particularly good for developing children's ability to manage their own learning, and has shown to have particularly strong impact on outcomes for remote learning. Working with parents to support children's learning, again, is really important in terms of engagement, and using digital technologies to improve learning as well. So 3 bits of further reading. Those guidance reports are all available on the EEF website. As I said, there are limitations. We're in unique circumstances. None of the research projects, none of this evidence has been generated in the circumstances of having a complete lockdown of schools. And that really does need to be a word of warning about transferability. A lot of the research has been done with much older pupils, so Key Stage 4, 5 and university age students. So we need to think about how relevant that is to our contexts. And speed. This report has been brilliantly responsive. It's out now. It's come out sort of within weeks of us going into the lockdown, but of course that in itself presents its own challenges. And there is a note around safeguarding as well, and understanding the safeguarding responsibilities that we have whilst delivering remote learning. There's a really good suite of resources on the NSPCC website, and you can follow that link there, or alternatively just Google NSPCC school safeguarding resources. So I hope that was useful. I'm going to move me out of the way. I realised I didn't introduce myself. I'm sorry. I'm Jemima Rees-Evans from Charles Dickens Research School. It's a really interesting read. There are many more resources available on the EEF website. They've put together a whole suite of resources to support home learning. I would particularly recommend the Metacognition and Self-Regulated Learning Guidance Report. But if you'd like to drop me an email, if you've got any further questions, then please do. Otherwise, thank you for listening. Stay well, stay safe, stay home. Thank you.